People keep asking if I'm back. But now, yeah, I'm thinking I'm back.
Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months. Yo, what up, Bolt fam? It's the Director. Chargers fans, how about that dub yesterday, baby? Let's freaking go. The Chargers, with a quick course correction, are right back on track. Now 2-2 on the season. We learned a lot of things in that game yesterday, man. Of course, Chargers fans, we really need to see some positivity come out of this team, a team that went all in this offseason. We need to see some signs of us trending in the right direction after suffering so many injuries over the course of the first 3 weeks of the season. Now, with some returning stars coming back into the fold, it seems like the Chargers are right back on track, even maybe buying themselves a little bit of time for other returning stars like Keenan Allen and Joey Bosa to make their way back onto the roster as well in good health. So yesterday's victory, man, again, much needed for the Chargers fans, and much can be taken away from this game, right? I saw a lot of great things in terms of the Chargers, correcting the course a little bit and getting things back on track. We're going to be covering that in today's video, but I also did want to point out a couple of things that maybe could be better as well, because like any Chargers fan will know, you're going to experience a bit of a heart attack in the fourth quarter in most of these games, and I think there's a couple of ways the Chargers can go about avoiding that in the future. So before we do get started, guys, we got our underdog shout out today, but if you guys missed out on what happened yesterday, let's go! Director just won $500 on Underdog Fantasy. Let's get it, baby! That's right, man. We hit big on Underdog yesterday. If you guys want to jump in on the action as well, definitely make sure to take a look at some of my picks for this week as listed on the screen above here, and make sure to use code DIRECTOR to match your first deposit up to $100. Get in on the action and join us on the Underdog Fantasy story there, man. Now, also, before we do get started, quick reminder, we do have a giveaway going on right now. We're giving away this signed Antonio Gates jersey to one of my lucky subscribers. All you got to do to enter for this is hit up the link in the description, follow the instructions there, and make sure you are subscribed. Only subs can win. But of course, we got 2 giveaways going on at any given moment, so we're also giving away this signed LaDainian Tomlinson jersey to one of my crew members as a thanks from me to you guys. All you got to do to be entered for this is be a member of my crew, and that's it. With that, let's jump into this one. Before we do, hit us up with a like and sub if you do enjoy this Chargers content. Small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into it. Lights, camera, action. The Chargers at Texans, Week 4 post-game report, along with the sweet taste of victory. Let's go ahead and jump into some of the stats from this week's game, man. Some great showouts from some great Chargers stars. This is exactly what I was hoping to see in this Chargers offense, by the way. Get your superstar studs involved in the offense, and only good things can happen. Let's go ahead and start here with Justin Herbert. 340 yards on the day, 2 touchdowns. This dude was absolutely electric. Again, we're going to get into some of the specifics here as we go along. Davis Mills, 246, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions, something to note right there. Austin Ekeler, 13 for 60 yards and 2 touchdowns with a long of 20 yards on one of those particular carries. Of course, we do have to point out Dameon Pierce as well, who did break free for a 75-yard touchdown as well, something the Chargers are going to have to clean him up. Receiving wise, Mike Williams, 120 yards on the day. Can't wait to talk about that. Gerald Everett was 61 and a tutty, and Austin Ekeler 49 and a tutty. Just nice numbers across the board. Of course, Michael Bandy making his entrance into the starting 53 this morning, or yesterday morning, and was able to figure it out to the tune of 2 receptions for 49 yards. He was definitely clutching a couple of drives there too. Nico Collins leading the pack there for the Texans there with 82 yards. Brandon Cooks with 57 and a tutty. Then Rex Burkhead with 39 and a tutty as well. Lastly, defensively, the Chargers did lose a fumble via DeAndre Carter, something that they're going to have to clean up, but also did force a couple of fumbles here too. I don't think the Chargers ended up picking up any of them there. And then lastly, defensively here, the Chargers did log a couple of sacks, I think. One by Sebastian Joseph Day, Khalil Mack, and of course Morgan Fox and Jerry Tillery. 4 sacks on the day for the Chargers defense, looking very, very nice. So let's jump into the specifics of this game, man. What made this game special? What are things that the Chargers can build on in terms of the strengths that we saw on Sunday, as well as what are some of the things that the Chargers can maybe fix and improve going into Week 5 versus the Cleveland Browns? Well, the first segment here is called X Marks the Spot. Somebody in my chat on Sunday said something to the tune of X Marks the Spot. I absolutely loved it. We're going to use it in today's video. Now, X Marks the Spot, dude. Austin Ekeler. One of our mods on the channel, Hugo, dude, he was hearing a lot of slander in terms of Austin Ekeler. I would think to the tune of a lot of people who drafted him in fantasy football. Totally get it. Bit of a slow start to start the year off, man. But this is still Austin Ekeler we're talking about. And Hugo wasn't having any of that talk, were you, Hugo? And he went in there knocking heads saying, have faith, man. It's coming. It's coming. And then it came, man, to the tune of 3 touchdowns for Austin Ekeler, over 100 yards, I would say, in total. I think maybe just underneath it. Very, very big day for Austin Ekeler, and maybe the jumping off point and the spark in which of what we can expect from Austin Ekeler going on throughout the rest of the season. Now, of course, I don't think we're going to expect 3 touchdowns from Austin Ekeler every single week, but we can expect maybe Joe Lombardi and this coaching, offensive game plan to maybe revolve around Austin Ekeler just a little bit more. Of course, that's something that the Chargers found tremendous success with in 2021. Austin Ekeler, 20 touchdowns last year. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it feels like the Chargers went back to something that was working last season with Austin Ekeler being one of the biggest focal points of the offense. And one of the biggest things that I love seeing, something that we've been, screaming about the last couple of weeks, was keeping Austin Ekeler available on passing downs, specifically underneath. There's a couple of plays, one including a 4th down conversion, might I add, where Austin Ekeler was available in the flat. And honestly, when you're Justin Herbert and you see that kind of space for Austin Ekeler, you're taking that every single time. You know what happened on that 4th down? Austin Ekeler open in the flat. He takes it for like a straight 20 yards or something like that. Very, very impressive. And that's exactly what I want to see from Austin Ekeler. We talked a lot about Joe Lombardi and his offense, the way that it used to operate last season. Of course, a lot of things that we saw drawn, let's say, from the New Orleans Saints offense in utilizing Alvin Kamara, that worked out very well last season. It feels like some of that came back in this game, and hopefully it's the kind of result that you see as an offensive coordinator that helps straighten the course just a little bit, right? Make sure that if you saw it work versus the Texans, be it a very poor Texans defense versus the run, you're going to want to utilize it a little bit more throughout the season. I think what I'm hoping to see utilized the most is the talent of a Austin Ekeler. So Austin Ekeler, man, big day for him. If you play a Madden Ultimate Team, we're hoping to see an item for him this week in terms of an upgrade, because this guy definitely earned it. And if you're a fantasy football owner of Austin Ekeler going into the season, maybe a little bit worried about his production, I would say more likely than not, Joe Lombardi is going back to his roots a little bit when it comes to Austin Ekeler. And we should see a lot of improvement going on throughout the season. But big day for Austin Ekeler, man. And this is exactly the kind of thing I was hoping to see in terms of shifting the offense back to its playmakers. And Austin Ekeler was probably the biggest standout in this week. Now, this next segment, the game ball goes to Jamari Salyer. I don't know if you guys saw that in some of the Twitter interactions with the Chargers after the game, but this is definitely a sight for sore eyes, man. The Chargers hit big on a 6th-round pick this last draft, and my oh my, did he show out in Week 4 versus the Texans. Him and Austin Ekeler out there, man, doing their thing. And this was a big part of the narrative of Week 4 for the Chargers, dude. The Chargers down Rashawn Slater, one of the best left tackles in football. What are they going to do? Last week, we saw Storm Norton step in there, and it was an absolute disaster, a dumpster fire, you might even say. The Chargers decided to respond in a very intelligent way, in my opinion. They take Jamari Salyer, who has a ton of upside. Sure, maybe not the archetype we're looking for in terms of agility and run blocking in space, but at the same time, he is one of those guys that you can trust your franchise quarterback with in Justin Herbert. We just needed to see it proven in live action football, and we saw that on Sunday. My hat is tipped to Jamari Salyer, man. He stepped in, a 6th-round pick, a rookie, first NFL start of his career, and he put up a heck of a show, man. I don't think he allowed one pressure on Sunday, which is definitely saying something, man, especially for somebody that snuck into the 6th round for the Chargers. We've been talking a lot about how he's been a steal, how we're hoping that he maybe elevates to starting left guard for this team, maybe moving Matt Fowler to right tackle and smoothing out the offensive line with those kind of moves. The Chargers decided to minimize the movements, move the left guard to left tackle, and it worked out fantastic. If you guys go back and take a look at some of the replays, the Chargers just put out a video with all of Justin Herbert's completions in Week 4. Keep an eye on number 68 on the left side of that line, man. Sure, he maybe is a little bit bigger, but that dude can move, and he was certainly doing his job to keep number 10 protected all this game. In the chat below, man, put number 68 in as a comment, dude. Some appreciation for Jamari Salyer. He may be the answer to smoothing out one of the biggest losses we've seen in our roster in a long time in Rashawn Slater. Sure, he's not going to be Rashawn Slater perhaps the entire season going forward, but he's sure as a heck a lot better than Storm Norton. We have to be super grateful that the Chargers, 1, drafted him, and 2, were intelligent enough to try him out at left tackle. Big day for Jamari Salyer, man, and a huge victory for the Chargers in terms of the draft. Might I add that the Chargers this season, with some of the rookie performances that we've been seeing, sure, maybe some of the guys need some time to develop. JT Woods, I think, is going to need a year. Some of those backup cornerbacks like Jasir Taylor and Dean Leonard going to need some time. There's one rookie that I would like to see a Jamari Salyer story maybe, implemented with to just give him a chance, and that's going to be Isaiah Spiller, dude. I want to see Isaiah Spiller get a chance. Of course, Sony Michel's been doing okay. JK has been doing pretty well too, but I think we may have the same potential in Jamari, or I should say in Isaiah Spiller, as we saw with Jamari Salyer. So again, a lot of good things in terms of that offensive line. Very, very nice to see Salyer step into the limelight and really take, fate by the horns and say, man, we got what it takes to play in this league, and we're going to add some value to this Chargers offense, even as a 6th-round selection. Speaking of that offensive line, it is so good to have Corey Linsley back, man. Again, Jamari Salyer, he put up such a good week, but I cannot go without crediting at least a little bit the Chargers' veteran leadership on that offensive line too, and it all starts, in my opinion, with Corey Linsley. If you guys take a look at this offense when Corey Linsley's on the field versus when he's off the field, it's a pretty dramatic difference, right? And it's because Jamari Salyer does about 80% of the work when it comes to communicating with the offensive line and assigning, protection, and it really feels like with Corey Linsley's, return to the field, the Chargers offense was just that much more, let's say, polished, and it feels like with the Corey Linsley in his return, maybe the other guys were helped elevated just a little bit too, including Jamari Salyer. So let's not let that go overlooked. I think the impact of a Corey Linsley on this team and on the league as perhaps the best center in football is one of the most valuable pieces of that offensive line. We got to hope and pray, knock on wood, that he stays healthy throughout the remainder of the season. Next up, let's talk about number 81. Finally, Chargers fans, I feel like the Chargers have figured it out. We are finally using Mike Williams the right way, in my opinion, because I feel like for the longest time, especially the first 3 weeks of the season, it felt like Mike Williams was your go-to possession catch receiver, right? The 50-50 kind of guy, the toss it up and pray, and maybe about 75% of the time it's going to work out in your favor. That's a big strength of Mike Williams and one that the Chargers should continue to utilize. However, that's not all Mike Williams is, man. Just because Mike Williams isn't the crisp route runner of a Keenan Allen or, the smooth movement guy of a Joshua Palmer, it doesn't mean that he doesn't have more to offer. And I saw so much more in this game in utilizing Mike Williams as a true number 1 receiver. This is pretty big, not just for this game, but for going forward. We saw Mike Williams, even on some of the simplest of routes, right? Slants, inside posts, stuff like that, some very simple movements. He was able to grab some separation and make some big plays, and especially in terms of moving the chains, getting those first downs. We're missing Keenan Allen, who's definitely the king of that in the NFL, especially for the Chargers, but Mike Williams was able to step into that role and make something happen. And this is very big in terms of what the Chargers maybe plans are at wide receiver going forward. If Mike Williams can continue to show that he's more than just the 50-50 guy, right? The Mossum kind of guy, then the Chargers are going to be inclined to use him more in different situations. And when you bring back a receiver like Keenan Allen, who's the ultimate third down, converter, I think you're going to be able to utilize a guy like Mike Williams even more in terms of big playability. That's one thing that the Chargers, I think, still need to improve on this season is big playability. And I think one of their best weapons on the offense right now to accomplish that is big man Mike Williams, number 81 on the offense. So what I saw on Sunday proved a lot of things to me, but one of the biggest, most exciting things for me was how the Chargers can utilize Mike Williams. I saw a lot more things in terms of an X receiver, a number one wide receiver, handed to Mike Williams, and he flourished to the tune of 120 yards through the air. This is the way Mike Williams, I think, was envisioned to be used as when he was drafted out of Clemson so many years ago, and this is the way I hope to see him utilized going forward with Joe Lombardi and the Chargers. Mike Williams is more than a possession receiver. He can move. He can create separation. He can be your number one guy going forward. Again, no disrespect to Keenan Allen. He's definitely still our number one wide receiver, but as things continue to progress into the future, you want to plan for Mike Williams as that X guy, and seeing these reps very, very important, especially so early in the season in week 4. Next up, who's the guy throwing the ball to Mr. Mike Williams? Justin Herbert. What a day for Justin Herbert. You guys saw over 300 yards, 340 yards, mind you, 2 touchdowns. This guy was absolutely electric. And a couple of things I wanted to point out in terms of Justin Herbert and where he stands right now in the season. For one, we still have to be very careful in terms of protecting Justin Herbert, making sure not to re-aggravate that rib injury. But as of right now, just with the way that he played, it feels like a lot of that rib injury may be behind him. Again, knock on wood, we need to make sure he's healthy and protected. But at the same time, the performance from last week versus the performance this week, you can't hold those two side by side and say they're the same picture. They are not. Justin Herbert was a different man on Sunday, and he really proved it, man, utilizing a lot of his weapons, really understanding how to attack this defense with Mike Williams and Austin Ekeler, while also featuring other guys like Gerald Everett. It felt like a very balanced offense, a very air raid kind of attack this week, and that's something that I was really hoping to see the Chargers utilize in week 4. Lean in on your strengths. This team is a passing offense this week, right? Or at least at this point of the season. While leaning into that, it may open up some more opportunities on the ground, and I sure as heck think we saw that on Sunday as well. Sure, the Houston Texans, not the best defense versus the run, but at the same time, I can't help but feel that Justin Herbert and these receivers, that performance through the air did open up a little bit of space on the ground to help Austin Ekeler get something going, and I have to credit that just a little bit. But I also have to point out that with a good rushing attack comes a great passing attack as well. So finding that balance, very important. Lean on your strength, but continue to build on whatever worked on the ground this week, because you're going to need it going forward versus much more stout defenses versus the run. Last thing I'll point out here for Justin Herbert is that he is currently leading the league in passing yards. Of course, the guy is an absolute sensation, a prodigy coming into the league at the quarterback position. 1,250 yards for Justin Herbert, and I think even Patrick Mahomes is about 150 yards away from him at this point. So Justin Herbert's the real deal. He's having another fantastic season in his young NFL career. Next up, another weapon for Justin Herbert that we have to highlight is Gerald Everett. You guys remember in my game preview, the plan of attack, at least for the director going into this one that we saw utilized very early in this game. Get the ball to your guy, Gerald Everett, one of the best guys in creating yards, after the catch, after contact, and he did just that, especially in the first drive offensively for the Chargers. The Texans very poor in tackling. We saw a lot of examples of, Gerald Everett able to maybe squeeze out a couple extra yards because of that physicality, and it definitely came into play this week. He did also score a touchdown. Very nice pass by Justin Herbert, threading the needle in what looked like cover 2. Very, very nice play for Gerald Everett. And it's something that I love to see in terms of utilizing the strengths of your weapons. I think personnel and the way that you utilize them versus different opponents is something extremely underrated and something I feel has not been fully utilized for Joe Lombardi this season. I saw a lot more of that this week, and I think Gerald Everett is also a big part of that success. Now, to add on to that, Gerald Everett is on his way to a career season with the Chargers, mind you. He is on pace for almost 900 yards and 9 touchdowns on the season. I'm going to say this right now, man. If you guys play fantasy football and Gerald Everett is floating around somewhere on the waiver wire and maybe you're struggling at the tight end position a little bit, consider my guy number 7 on the Chargers. I think him and Justin Herbert are starting to build something special, and Gerald Everett should see a very nice season if he can keep up the pace by year's end. Next up, we got to give credit where credit's due, man. Praise to our dude, Jerry Tillery. He did a thing. Jerry Tillery did a thing. Cheers to you, Jerry Tillery. Thank you so much for stepping in and doing something for the Chargers this season, and it came at a very critical moment too. The Chargers needed a spark. They needed something on defense to work their way. Jerry Tillery steps in, forces a fumble on a sack. Of course, the Chargers did not recover it, unfortunately, but it did force the Texans into, I think, a third and very long situation, ultimately giving the Chargers maybe a bit of a spark in terms of momentum. So Jerry Tillery, yes, we do maybe poke fun at him a little bit on this channel because, of course, we like to see more from a first-round pick. But in this game, we got to give credit where credit's due, man. 99 did something in this game, something very important, especially in terms of the timing in which he was able to accomplish that play. Props to Jerry Tillery, man. Hopefully, we continue to see that throughout the rest of the season. Maybe a bit of a redemption story for Jerry Tillery would be very good for him, even if the Chargers decide to move on from him after this season. Let's give him something to work with when hitting the free agency market just a little bit. So good for Jerry Tillery, man. He did a thing. He did a thing. Next up, in terms of Chargers defenders that maybe have a bit of things to work out, we got to talk a little bit about J.C. Jackson, man. J.C. Jackson, he's off to a bit of a slow start this season, okay? And I think there's a couple of reasons to that. For one, he's still figuring things out in terms of the Chargers defense. I think we saw a lot of great things in terms of this offseason, right? He looked definitely like the best or one of the best defenders out there at the DB position in training camp. He continued to do so into the preseason. Then he had to go down for that ankle procedure, of which I'm not convinced that he's 100% recovered from quite yet. And I think it's because of his closing speed. You guys understand, when a receiver catches the ball or a running back takes off with the ball, you're trying to close that distance as quickly as possible. And then looking at J.C. Jackson and some of his, biggest plays from previous seasons, he's very good at closing that distance very, very quickly. It just feels like right now he's not able to generate that kind of acceleration at this point, and it might be because he's still recovering from that ankle procedure. I do think that given a little bit more time, we'll start to see why J.C. Jackson was paid the way that he was and was so, highly prioritized by Brandon Staley and this defensive coaching team to go in there and get and pursue in free agency. But for right now, I would just say be a little patient with J.C. Jackson. I'm seeing a lot of people maybe a little frustrated at how long it's taking for him to kind of get up to speed. But when it comes to anything in terms of medical health or procedures on your feet, on your ankles, that's going to come into play during the season as well. So I would give him a little bit more time. It's great to see him out there on the field, but we're hoping to see that ankle at 100% sooner than later, so we can start seeing that closing speed and speed in general when it comes to defending guys like, let's say, Dameon Pierce on the outside. I think he had a chance to do that, but just couldn't quite get there fast enough. Next up, got to give a bit of praise to my dude Derwin James as well, man. If you guys are watching this game, the past couple of games too, man, even last week, that brutal game versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, Derwin James has been nothing but fantastic, man. Absolutely fabulous. And he did it again this week versus the Texans. The Texans, maybe not best known for utilizing their tight ends as much. Maybe we saw a little bit of O.J. Howard. But outside of that, Derwin James was really locked down in terms of his assignments in coverage, utilizing him as a pass rusher a little bit too, kind of all over the field, and continues to do that to this day now in week 4. Perhaps the most valuable player on the field for the Chargers on defense right now is Derwin James. And if you pay attention to the Chargers defensive snaps, Derwin James is a big difference maker, even though the ball isn't making its way in his area as often, in which, when it does, he does definitely make some big plays. His effect on the game is very evident because of how few yards that he's allowing to guys in his area. So very nice to see Derwin James out there doing his thing and leading this defense as, again, the best defensive player for the Chargers right now. Next up, we got to give a little bit of hope in terms for Chargers fans and the pass rush right now, who is missing Joey Bosa. I think the pass rush in this game proved that they are still strong without Joey Bosa. Now, when we talked about Austin Ekeler a little bit, we did mention that the Houston Texans run defense is one of the worst in the NFL, and we have to maybe, take it with a grain of salt a little bit in terms of Austin Ekeler's performance. I think Ekeler could be immune to that given the right system by Joe Lombardi, but at the same time, that was a realistic situation. Now, on the other side of the ball, the Houston Texans, very good on the offensive line, okay? They have one of the better offensive lines in football, and the Chargers pass rushing unit was still able to figure something out even with the absence of Joey Bosa. This is very, very good. The Chargers, to the tune of 4 sacks, were still able to get Khalil Mack free, get other guys involved like Jerry Tillery, Sebastian Joseph Day, and Morgan Fox. 4 sacks, very, very nice, and these did result in a lot of errant throws by the quarterback, Sam Mills, who did have a couple of interceptions this game as well. I think the recipe for success is still there. Get to the quarterback, force some throws, let your playmakers at the DB position clean it up, and maybe force a little bit more turnovers, because the Chargers definitely need more. At this point, the Chargers looking very good this season in terms of improving that turnover ratio, and I do think it starts at the ground level with your defensive line and your pass rushers, and it really feels like even without Joey Bosa, the Chargers have been able to figure things out. And again, very important for the Chargers to find success in this game versus a very good offensive line, because it just means that the Chargers should be okay, right? We should be okay going into the next couple of weeks without Joey Bosa while we wait for him to return. And once he's back, man, we're going to be right back where we started at the start of the season, man. Very, very lethal duo with Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa. But until then, things seem to be working out. One of the last things I do want to cover in this video, the run D definitely needs, or I should say, Asante Samuel Jr. Might be one of our best cornerbacks right now, and that really is saying something. Not deterring away from the other cornerbacks on the roster right now, but we got J.C. Jackson, man. We got Bryce Callahan, who's looking as good as ever this season. Asante Samuel Jr., man, he's ascending into something else this year. A playmaker. Sure, he needs to clean up the penalties just a little bit. If I were to put, one demerit on the Asante Samuel Jr. slip, I would say you got to clean up those PIs especially. But outside of that, man, he's quickly turning into one of the better cornerbacks in the league. And the Chargers very fortunate in his ascension because, again, it's going to help the Chargers in terms of waiting for JC to catch up a little bit, having a guy like him that can hold down the fort. Number 26 has been out there making plays, very close to a lot of interceptions, very great in terms of defending against the pass. He's been absolutely fantastic. But one of the biggest things that's impressed me with the Asante so far is his closing speed, the thing that we're seeing maybe missing from J.C. Jackson at this point. Able to close that distance so quickly, especially when it comes to underneath passes. Just like in this pass here to Brandon Cooks, which was a completion, Asante Samuel Jr. closed that distance so quick, ended up only allowing maybe 1 or 2 yards. That is where you know you've got a difference maker at cornerback. And Asante Samuel Jr., hats off to you, my guy. He may be the best corner on the Chargers roster right now. Next up, the run D still does need a little bit of work. Now, I will say that the Chargers' run defense, for the most part, looked pretty good, right? They looked okay until it's not. And this is the thing that we talked about last week versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Chargers' run defense looked pretty steady for a while, but there's always that one big play. Last week, it was a James Robinson huge run for a touchdown. This week, it was a Dameon Pierce huge run for a touchdown. And in the end, I don't know if it matters how good or okay you are throughout a game if you're going to allow at least one big play to the running back every single week. So that's something that if I were Brandon Staley, I would emphasize in terms of your run defense. Make sure that that big playability is at least improved going into next week versus the Cleveland Browns, who maybe have the best rushing attack in football right now. So that's something to pay attention to going into week 5. And lastly, Joe Lombardi. I know a lot of people are going to say, like, but director, what are the things that we can improve on? This is the biggest one, okay? And that's why I saved it for second to last. Joe Lombardi, his seat is still sizzling because what we saw on Sunday, we saw a lot of really good things, right? The Chargers were moving the ball. We had Justin Herbert slinging it, like a cowboy out there, as efficient as ever, right? The Chargers' weapons were all being utilized properly. I saw a lot of good things in Joe Lombardi's offense this week. Hats off to him in those regards. But where it really mattered, in the third and fourth quarter, where the Chargers started making a little bit of mistakes, we had to convert. Clock management became a hugely important thing. We saw a bit of leniency. And as much as I appreciate Joe Lombardi and his improvement this week, we have to make sure the consistency is also there. I do believe that Joe Lombardi can figure it out, guys. I'm not sitting here like the only answer is to fire Joe Lombardi and, elevate a Shane Day. I don't think that's the only answer. I think Joe Lombardi can figure it out. And we saw maybe 3 out of 4 things improve that I was hoping to see on Sunday. But the last one is so important. We have to close out, man. We have to keep our foot on the gas, step on their throats, make sure that they can't play catch-up, because the Chargers were almost victim to one of the most classic Chargers situations on Sunday in terms of having a huge lead and almost blowing it. You can prevent that from ever happening with an aggressive and consistent offense. And I feel like Joe Lombardi, very, very close, still has a little bit more to improve in terms of his consistency, but I'm starting to see a lot of things that I was hoping to see return from last season. That's a good sign. So maybe we should be a little bit more patient. We saw some good stuff from Joe this last Sunday, but we have to see that consistency as well. Because if that consistency isn't there and the opposing team is allowed to catch up, even surpass us, things can get ugly and games can slip through our fingers. So that's one big thing I have to emphasize about Joe Lombardi. And the last thing I wanted to kind of lightly cover in terms of this video. Director, why are we showing the Broncos and the Raiders? Well, it's because I wanted to lightly tease something that I want to talk about here in the next couple of days. The current state of the AFC West, okay? And it's going to be one of the questions I ask you guys in the comments. What do you guys think in terms of the AFC West? How are the Chargers looking in terms of their placement, okay? Obviously, right now, the Chargers second place in the AFC West, right behind the Kansas City Chiefs. But what are we thinking about the Broncos and Raiders all of a sudden? It feels like the Broncos not living up to expectations with Russell Wilson. Some of the struggling games that we saw with him with the Seattle Seahawks last season seem to have carried into this season, and that offense is one of the toughest to watch in the NFL right now. On the other side, you have the Raiders, who I think have a really good offense, but extremely poor defense, and also pretty poor protection for Derek Carr. Both these teams maybe not living up to expectations of their home teams might open a door for the Chargers. The only thing is, the guy standing in front of the door right now, they're the Kansas City Chiefs, and they just thumped the Tampa Bay Buccaneers yesterday on Sunday Night Football. Chargers really have a lot of things to sort out. So looking at the current state of the AFC West, I think the Chargers can handle the Raiders and the Broncos just fine. But yet again, it's going to be those Kansas City Chiefs that we need to prepare for and be ready for. I think it's in Week 11. We have a lot of games to prepare up until then, but the Chargers got to grab a win there. So that's my bottom line, guys. My bottom line in this video, the Chargers saw a lot of really, really good things this week. In the end, it was a dub. We had a bit of a scare in the fourth quarter, but there are things that the Chargers can still improve on before going into Week 5 versus the Browns. That's going to be a very, very big test. Some things that the Chargers can prove to us next week is that they figured out the run defense a little bit. They found a way to creatively slow down Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Okay, they're able to still get after the quarterback in Jacoby Brissett with guys like Khalil Mack and, let's say, opposite him, Chris Rumph or Kyle Van Noy, even Morgan Fox. They've been able to utilize those interior guys pretty intelligently as well. If we can prove that the Chargers are up to that task, I think we may see a big bounce back starting this week going into, let's say, Week 11 when we finally rematch the Kansas City Chiefs. You guys let me know on that. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. If you did enjoy what you saw here, hit us up with a like and sub on your way out. This has been The Director. We'll see you next time. And as always, bolt up and stay frosty. Good for you, Justin Herbert, Austin Ekeler, Mike Williams. This offense is starting to look like it's back on track.